Do Democrats have a problem with diversity messaging? Well, former Biden Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg seems to think so.
During a forum called The Future of the Democratic Party recently, political consultant David Axelrod asked Buttigieg about the spectacle that was the DNC chair election. Here's Buttigieg's response.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a little bit of that event you described, and it was a caricature of everything that is wrong with our ability both to cohere as a party and to reach to those who don't always agree with us. And we cannot go on like that. We cannot. I also think that we believe in the values that we care about for a reason. And this is not about abandoning those values. It's about making sure we're in touch with the first principles that animate them. What do we mean when we talk about diversity? Is it caring for people's different experiences and making sure no one's mistreated because of them, which I will always fight for? Or is it making people sit through a training that looks like something out of Portlandia, which I have also experienced, and it is how Trump Republicans are made, if that comes to your workplace with the best of intentions, but doesn't actually get at what actually matters here, what's actually at stake. I think, and this might sound counterintuitive, if we were more serious about the actual values and not caught up in vocabularies and trying to cater to everybody only in terms of their particular slice of combinations of identities versus the shared project, I actually think if we thought about it a little bit differently, things like diversity would be actually an example of how we reach out beyond our traditional coalition.
MSNBC host Chris Hayes also weighed in on the issue earlier this month. Here he is on Real Time with Bill Maher.
I don't think there's anyone who hasn't had a moment across the political spectrum of some form of progressive communication that's either left them bewildered or a little like, I don't know about that. But I also think at the same time, there is a message of what I would call like common sense, patriotic pluralism. I think like fundamental parts of what we call in this country the traditions of pluralism, which is what this country is. And pluralism is another word for diversity. If we're not going to use that one, let's use pluralism. That fundamentally there's a majority that understands that like we all come from different places. Yeah. And part of what makes this country work is we acknowledge and we negotiate those differences. And that's a thing that I think Democrats can win back a majority of message. I do.
So getting back to Pete Buttigieg, the AP reports that he is weighing whether he should run for Senate from Michigan or for the presidency itself.
Senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, Chris Rufo, wrote on X, Buttigieg is a cipher for the elite lib consensus, deletes the pronouns in his bio, adopts right-wing messaging on DEI. It's entirely cynical. He thought roads were racist, but a useful signal. Now is the time for the right to drive a wedge between elite libs and their DEI clients.
Whew. Oh, Christopher Rufo, with his Rufo-esque takes. I mean, the roads were racist argument is a mischaracterization of a completely valid argument, in my view, which is city planning and urban planning often cut off majority black neighborhoods from the broader cities within which they sat. But I guess that isn't the main topic in our...
Pete Buttigieg is savvy. He is most certainly pivoting. I do agree that this guy is angling for the Senate or the White House in the next 2 cycles. But he's right. I mean, when did we decide as a country to just overnight switch from referring to Asian voters as AAPI voters? This is not something that people connect with, but it just happened over the course of the Biden administration in the culture. And you could say that this sort of phase really began during the Trump presidency in 2017 onward as sort of the culture was backlashing against Donald Trump. But I really disagree with Chris Hayes that diversity is somehow unpopular as a word. Mm-hmm. I grew up in the 90s. Diversity never bothered anybody. It was sort of baked into the cake that, like he said, we're a country of people who come from all different places and have different beliefs. But the diversity of DEI was very much based on exclusion and trying to shame people who are part of majoritarian groups for being who they are.
Tell me more about what you mean by exclusion in that sense.
Well, I don't think anybody ever thought that in DEI seminars that inclusion was meant to have the, let's say, straight married white Christian guy feel comfortable in the meetings. It was never about them actually getting opportunities to still speak. It was based on, we assume that you talk too much and shout down your fellow employees of different backgrounds. It was never about having people come together. It was identifying people and going, you're a problem, you've spoken too much historically, no more of you. And voters know that, and that's exactly what Buttigieg is speaking to here.
Well, it is exactly what Buttigieg is speaking to, but more to the point, the debate that we're having right now is also what Buttigieg is speaking to. Because Buttigieg said, what do we mean when we talk about diversity? And I thought it was a very good phrase about getting caught up in vocabularies. Yes. And I do think that there is validity to that argument and to making people feel sort of morally inferior if they don't say Latinx and say, you know, Latina or Latino instead, or things like that. But Buttigieg, in his remarks, made the differentiation between the values of essentially protecting people from discrimination and the separate issue of the trainings that you're talking about, which he rather amusingly described as like something out of Portlandia. Yeah. Now, the problem that I have often when DEI is discussed is that the criticism, particularly from the right, is always about, shall we say, the Portlandia wing, and never about the fact that there are, in fact, continuing structural inequalities in American life, and it would be to everyone's benefit, including the overall nation's economic benefit, if those were addressed. So, for example, unemployment rates between races, even when controlled for education, are still at significant variance. In 2023, for example, white people who did not complete high school had a 7.3 unemployment rate. Black people who did not complete high school was almost double that at 13.4%.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I assume it is because there is a combination of basic underlying prejudice, and also because there is the legacy of white people in America having greater economic power, and therefore the networks that extend out from that, even at the lower income levels of employment, ultimately benefit white people.
This won't surprise you. This is a pretty boilerplate conservative position, but you know, AEI's most recent report on family structure and wealth and prosperity in America, that's the American Enterprise Institute, pointed out that the main drivers of success in this country economically are going to be when you have your first children, are you within a marital structure, or are you single and having children, and do you complete your education? And this breaks down everything. Republicans, I think, get a little bit too giddy to talk about this issue in racial terms, but there are plenty of black Republicans who will happily do it, say that there is a huge single parenthood problem in the black community and boys who don't know their fathers. These have generational downstream effects. Generational wealth and safety nets are best done in the family. And people fall behind when they don't do well in school, they get a poor education, and then they enter the workforce, they have a problem, right? They break their leg, they get disabled. Well, in maybe those families that came up in married households, let's say that they're white and upper income, that's their safety net. They get help. And it's not racist that they got help. They have families that are intact and that can help them. And that is less so in black communities.
But I don't think that the point that you are making disproves the point that I'm making as comprehensively as you think it does. For this reason, when you talk about things like single parenthood in black communities, there are reasons why those rates are higher, and they are not moral failings. They're because incarceration rates for black people were historically much higher than white people. They were because economic opportunity was significantly lower for black people, removing the capacity of usually the man, but not always, to be a sole breadwinner in a nuclear family. And so the erosion of what I think conservatives would call the traditional family in black communities itself has roots in racial inequalities and racial injustices.
I certainly agree with that to a certain extent. You and I have talked about the prison system on this show before, and it's indisputable. The amount of growth in the size of our incarceration system is so racially obvious, you have to ask questions about how we get to that point. But, you know, going back to Buttigieg and the comments about diversity, you know, I think it is telling that they still have appointed VP of the DNC, David Hogg, who was saying things in the past couple of years, such as gun control was a movement started by entirely black, brown, and indigenous LGBTQ women and non-binary people. What? Like, this is the problem, and I think this is what Buttigieg just wanted to put his head through a wall on. My problem is that I saw Buttigieg as Department of Transportation Secretary head, and he would have nodded right along with this when he was serving in the Biden administration. It's only that he is out of the administration that he's now going, guys, you made a mistake. This was a messaging failure. He went right along with it.
I mean, we're going to have to wrap, I'm being told, but I think that sometimes electoral defeats can be useful because they encourage people to basically change positions that were unpopular or to
That's right.
move.
Shouldn't we have a system that like privileges popular positions?
that.
Democracy.
Next up, another hot topic, police accountability. Should it be measured? Stay with us.